was not planning on making today's video. Here I am, just kind of bringing you up to date on what has happened on this current project that I'm working on so far, because I do think that we see all these tutorials and how-to videos. They speed things up, they cut out the parts where they struggled and all the parts you don't really want to show people. Here's me showing you the struggles, basically. I offered my services to a high school. The drama teacher who kind of directs this play that they're going to be putting up and touring around the region with showed me an inspo pic of what she sort of wanted the set to look like, and she created it with AI and she was very lenient. Sorry if you can hear my dog. She is very moany this morning. I don't know what's happening, but just please ignore it. We created it with AI and she was aware that obviously AI isn't super realistic, so she said that that is sort of just a guideline of what she wants it to look like. They have a really low budget and I was like, okay, we'll make it work. I'll go around the area to different woodworking places that I know of and I've like researched, and then I'll ask them for their scrap wood. Which, by the way, I do want to thank the wood community, if I can call it that, in the Western Cape, because wow, they really pulled through. Like, they really gave me a lot of stuff, which I'm really grateful for, and they were so helpful as well. So yeah, if you're like a small time, or if you're like a person who's just making like a small DIY project and it's not a big item, I definitely suggest doing that. Although, something to keep in mind, the wood that I got was press wood, and it was covered in melamine as well. So for those of you who don't know, that's the typical wood that you would see with cupboards. Like if you have a built-in cupboard in South Africa at least, usually it's made out of press wood, and that plastic material that it's covered with, that's called melamine. So that's what I ended up working with. It's offcuts, so the pieces I got were very small and the items that I had to make were big. So I had to make bigger wood panels by gluing them together with wood glue, and I knew that this was gonna be time consuming. I didn't realize how time consuming. I also ended up having to actually buy bigger clamps because I realized the clamps that I had were not big enough to clamp it all together at the end. It's sort of like an investment because I can use those clamps for future projects and stuff, but it was kind of an unplanned expense. This caused so many issues because the high school students are supposed to be walking on this platform, so it should be quite sturdy. You want it to be safe. So because I was sticking all these pieces together, it meant that it wouldn't necessarily be able to hold an 80-kilo boy, for example. I'd say it would be low-key dangerous. And what I ended up having to do is screw, so as this is like the panel, the top panel, let's say here's where I stuck them together, the two smaller pieces. Then I would have to screw one piece here to make sure that when somebody steps on that, it doesn't break in because there's something supporting it here. So I had to do that everywhere where there was a gluing together spot, and that also took a lot of time, and it made the cutting of the wood very complicated. It also made the whole screwing it all together complicated. Now you essentially have like 2 layers of press wood that you're trying to screw onto this piece here. So it's like 2 layers here, and then you're trying to screw this here. It was so complicated, it took so much time, it was so stressful. I can't make 6 of these big box structures like this. This is taking way too much time, way too much effort, resources, it's not working. So then I go back to the teacher and I explain the situation to her. I apologize obviously, and I say like, really, I'm sorry, we need to buy wood. Because if you can buy the panels that are the correct sizes, ready-made, you're not sticking things together, firstly, it makes the whole thing safer, and secondly, so much faster. And then, because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to meet the deadline. Luckily, she was super understanding, and then they gave me some budget money to go get the wood. I had the panels cut at a hardware store nearby, and then that was way easier to work with. The melamine box essentially took me 2 weeks, right? It took me 2 weeks. And then I did the other 5 boxes with shutterply in 2 days. Compare that time difference, it's insane. I put in wood filler in the spots that need some, you know, wood filler, and I sand it. And that's where we are today. But now, at the point of needing to prime these boxes, actually you can't paint on melamine, just like that. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, but you just sand it and then it's gonna be rough enough and the paint will take. That's not how it works. So I had to go buy a special primer for the melamine box by itself, because you don't use wood primer for the melamine. We didn't pay for wood, you know, we got all these offcuts, it's great, but how much money did I spend on wood glue to get all those pieces together? I had to go buy longer screws to get all the panels together. I paid in labor and time. And now I'm paying in a special primer. So also, something I didn't take into account when I initially took on the project, and that came to me later, was the fact that obviously kids will be walking on this platform and it will be white and they will have to reuse it, so it needs to be easily wipeable and cleanable. So it needs to be gloss and it needs to be floor paint because people will walk over it. And that's also much more expensive than normal, just like wall paint or acrylic paint. So actually I did the maths and it's about 4 times the price of normal wall paint. So yeah, that's where we are right now. I'll definitely keep you updated after I've painted, and then yeah, we'll see where we end up. The day has finally come and I am done. The 2 smaller boxes on top was actually made out of giveaway wood. Parents donated like these very long, I'd say probably 3 meter long, yeah, 3 meter long wooden planks. The wood had been lying outside for quite a time, so the entire outside layer was rotten. I used a scrubbing plane to get that layer off. At first I wanted to use a belt sander, but I just realized that layer was so thick that it was going to be really time consuming, so I just ended up using the scrubbing plane to get all of it off. And woo, that took some time, because it was like, I think it was between 60 and 70 planks that I had to do by hand, so it was sort of intense, but I got it done. I used a table saw to cut the planks on the sides because they've been lying out in weather, so that means some of them have like warped a little and stuff, so I had to put them through the table saw to make sure all of them had straight sides at least. I wish I had a tool to kind of make them all the same width, but I didn't, so unfortunately the box isn't as even as I would have wanted it to be, like the panels, but at least they're all stuck together properly. Glued them together with wood glue, and then it was the process of screwing all the sides together. Wood does have a little bit of flex on them, so if you stand on it in the middle, it kind of does this. It's not necessarily super visible to the eye, but just for like to make sure nobody falls or breaks the thing or whatever, I put like a support panel in the middle inside every box to make sure it's stable. The 2 smaller boxes, again, we had to use wood primer and we had to paint over it. I actually do want to go over what all of this cost me. I will be going over the receipts. I needed to buy sanding discs for the sander. Anything you paint beforehand, you should sand it a little bit so that the paint can really stick on it, and just to get rid of any smooth surfaces that the paint will just slide off. You know, you want the paint to be able to grip to something. 136 Rand. Then the shutterply for 5 of the big boxes. I don't know if you can hear my dog moan again. The big boxes were 1200 millimeters by 810 millimeters, and then the height was 450 millimeters. And I bought that at Builder's Warehouse. 3,749 and 56 cents. Guys, this is what shutterply costs. I had never actually used new wood. I've always had to work with cut-offs and just scraps that I could find. And I had no idea that this is what wood costs. I was so shocked. I remember when I was at Builders and the guy told me the price. I called my dad and I'm like, this cannot be, he must be scamming me or something. And my dad's like, no, that's what wood costs. Why is everything so expensive? But anyway, bought 1,000 screws, 89 Rand. This is the receipt for the wood filler, 195 Rand and 30 cents. This is the receipt for wood primer that I bought at Cash Build, and that cost 439 Rand and 95 cents. The actual floor paint and the primer that I had to use for the melamine. And that cost me 1,383 Rand and 20 cents. And then here we have the receipt for pipes. I used pipe clamps, but it's not really something that is super available in South Africa, which I will make a separate video on. 186 Rand and 92 cents. Total, this project cost me 6,179 Rand and 93 cents, and that is excluding the fuel and the labor. That was just to give you an idea of what this thing cost. You know, I think it's so important to be transparent about prices of these things, because I think it's so easy to watch these videos and be like, oh yeah, okay, this and this, and you didn't really realize when everything adds up, it's quite expensive actually. I had to buy a separate primer for the melamine and a separate primer for the wood. That was an unnecessary expense. I think it would have been cheaper if it was actually all just shutterply, although then the cost on the shutterply would have been more because I would have had to buy more. But I think it actually would have cancelled out in a way. I also think I wouldn't have had to buy so many screws if I didn't work with the melamine, because obviously I had to buy different screws for the melamine because it was thicker, so I had to buy longer screws, and then for the shutterply and the other wood I had to have shorter screws because it's thinner. So yeah, that like caused a lot of like unnecessary, you know. I'm gonna show you the end results and then you can tell me what you think and maybe what you would have done differently.